$6 tickets for a championship matchup, rows of empty seats echoing through what should have been the league's grandest night, and two of the WNBA's brightest stars standing on the floor realizing that without one particular player, the excitement had vanished. What unfolded during the 2025 WNBA Finals wasn't merely disappointing. It was a harsh reminder that exposed a truth the league had long avoided. Imagine this. You're Aya Wilson or Jonquil Jones. You've survived a demanding season, fought through the playoffs, and finally earned a spot on the biggest stage. This should be your defining moment. The lights, the fans, the recognition of your hard work. Instead, as you step onto the court, you're greeted by endless rows of empty red seats that feel more like a deserted arena than a final. The atmosphere isn't electric. It's absent. Later, you check ticket prices online and find seats selling for less than the cost of dinner. $6 for the finals, the WNBA Finals. This was never the plan. After a record-setting 2024 season filled with sold-out venues and ratings that shattered every prediction, the belief was that success would continue. The league appeared to have turned a corner, or so it seemed. Caitlin Clark's debut season had become a full-blown cultural moment. Every time she stepped on the floor, it felt like an event. Tickets, once priced at $20 or $30, suddenly sold for hundreds. Arenas that had never filled before were now packed beyond capacity. Networks rushed to air more WNBA games because the numbers were exceeding every projection. But here's where the story takes a turn. And if you're intrigued by what really happened, tap that like button and tell us in the comments whether the WNBA can stand strong without Caitlin Clark. Because what's coming next is even more surprising. The Indiana Fever's season became the stuff of history. With Caitlin Clark leading the offense beside Aaliyah Boston's power inside, they transformed from a struggling team into a true contender almost instantly. Every matchup they played turned into must-see basketball. Social media flooded with Clark highlights. Young fans everywhere started wearing number 22 jerseys. The Fever weren't just collecting wins, they were shaping a movement. They made women's basketball exciting in a way it had never been. Then came their playoff elimination. When Indiana fell in the second round, something unheard of happened. The casual supporters, the ones who discovered the league through Clark's thrilling play and Sophie Cunningham's fierce attitude, vanished overnight. Gone completely. It was as if those fans had never existed at all. The television ratings didn't simply fall, they collapsed completely. We're talking about nearly a 50% drop between games featuring Indiana and the conference finals. 50%. That's not a slowdown. That's a total breakdown. The league tried to cover it up. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert released statements about competitive balance and the strength of the postseason. Marketing teams worked nonstop to promote the finals matchup. They highlighted Aya Wilson's MVP resume, discussed championship legacies, and explored every angle possible. But numbers don't lie, and social media doesn't either. Fans began sharing screenshots of ticket prices with captions like, "You couldn't give these away." And remember when WNBA tickets used to sell out instantly? The jokes came fast and hit hard, and honestly, they weren't wrong. But that wasn't the entire picture. Behind the curtain, sources within the league who requested anonymity described complete disorder. Team executives were terrified about revenue forecasts. Broadcast partners were holding emergency talks about their contracts. Sponsors were quietly questioning their audience guarantees. The entire structure built around Caitlin Clark's stardom was shaking, and everyone could see it, except maybe the players who had spent all of 2024 minimizing her influence. Aya Wilson had been especially vocal, insisting the league's rise came from collective effort, not one athlete, and that the WNBA had been building toward this success for years. She wasn't mistaken about the groundwork, but she was entirely off about the current situation. When she stepped into that half-empty arena for Game 1 of the finals, the reality must have been jarring. This was meant to be her moment of triumph, her chance to show that WNBA stars could carry the sport without the rookie everyone couldn't stop talking about. Instead, it turned into a very public embarrassment. Watching the finals footage is genuinely difficult for anyone who loves women's basketball. Camera crews struggled to capture angles that didn't reveal empty seats. Commentators kept describing the intimate setting, which was just another way of saying barely anyone came. Players looked frustrated, and not only by the competition. You could see it in their faces during breaks, the way they glanced up at the vacant upper decks, and the strained smiles during introductions. Jonquil Jones, usually calm and composed, was caught on a hot mic saying, "This is really embarrassing," during a stoppage in play. That short clip spread faster online than any actual highlight from the finals. What followed stunned everyone, even those who had warned this might happen. The backlash on social media against the league, and especially against players who had criticized Caitlin Clark, was intense. Fans began sharing comparison videos showing packed Fever games from the regular season alongside empty seats at the finals. One particularly harsh TikTok showed ticket prices dropping day after day before the finals, set to somber background music. It pulled in more than 3 million views within a day. Another viral post collected every dismissive comment veteran players had made about Clark during her rookie year, captioned, "This is what happens when you forget who brought the fans." It was blunt, but the internet rarely holds back. The players tried to respond. Aya Wilson posted about respect and appreciation for the sport, but her comments section turned hostile. Thousands replied with the same message. "Where are the fans you're talking about? We saw the empty seats." Jonquil Jones tried a more measured approach, saying true fans support the league no matter who's playing. But that statement only fueled frustration, as it seemed to suggest that those who tuned in for Clark weren't real supporters. That idea didn't land well when championship tickets were selling for the cost of a cheap meal. Here's where things took a turn most people didn't see coming. League insiders revealed there were heated discussions between players and officials during the finals. Multiple stars, including Wilson and Jones, demanded answers about why the league's marketing energy vanished after Indiana's exit. They questioned why the promotional push that had been so strong all season suddenly stopped. According to those close to the situation, the league's answer was simple. What could they promote when the player fans wanted to see was no longer in the playoffs? That response created a clear divide across locker rooms. On one side were veterans who felt overlooked, believing they had earned their spotlight through years of effort and consistency. On the other were younger players and a few candid veterans who accepted the truth. Caitlin Clark had transformed the sport, and denying it wouldn't change reality. The tension grew so intense that multiple teams reportedly held players-only meetings to address the obvious question. Should they feel thankful for the spotlight Caitlin Clark brought, or frustrated that it vanished when she did? The financial fallout proved even worse than the perception problem. Franchises that had counted on strong playoff income based on the 2024 numbers suddenly faced major losses. Concession stands were quiet, merchandise sales stalled, and local sponsors who had joined during the height of Clark Mania started asking to renegotiate contracts. One anonymous team executive admitted, "We went from planning expansions and upgrades to wondering how we'd cover payroll." That's how quickly everything changed. What was supposed to be the WNBA's breakthrough year started looking fragile, built not on stability, but on one player's impact. Television partners were equally alarmed. ESPN had poured serious resources into its WNBA broadcasts, moving games into prime time and expanding coverage. But without Clark, the audience numbers simply didn't support the investment. Leaked internal reports revealed that several finals games attracted fewer viewers than mid-season women's college basketball matchups earlier that year. Let that sink in, the professional championship series was losing to college games in ratings. That wasn't just disappointing, it was disastrous for future media negotiations. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark herself was nowhere near the chaos. She was rehabbing her shoulder injury, the same one that had affected her down the stretch and contributed to Indiana's early playoff exit. But Clark wasn't sitting idle. She was back in the gym, sharing training clips that outperformed finals highlights online. Her sponsor appearances continued drawing huge crowds, and when she made a surprise visit to an Iowa women's basketball game, the crowd erupted, chanting her name for minutes. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. The player off the court was generating more attention than the league's title series itself. Media outlets tried to salvage interest. They pushed stories about Aya Wilson's pursuit of another ring, the meaning of legacy, and the pride of competition. But the public wasn't buying it. Sports talk shows that had once dedicated full segments to WNBA coverage during Clark's run suddenly shifted back to the NFL draft and NBA trades. And when the finals did get mentioned, it was mostly to ask the painful question, why isn't anyone watching? Which only deepened the problem. Even lifelong fans of women's basketball admitted privately that the games felt dull without the spark Caitlin Clark and the fever had brought. Here's what's truly astonishing. Leaked ticket data showed that some finals games had more empty seats than people in them. Many who'd bought tickets earlier in the year expecting excitement simply decided not to show up once Indiana was out. The resale market completely crashed. Scalpers who thought they'd profit on finals tickets ended up handing them out near the arena. One viral clip showed someone offering 2 courtside seats for $20 total, and still, no one took them. That wasn't just embarrassing, it was catastrophic. The global reaction made it even more striking. WNBA games had started gaining real momentum overseas during the 2024 season, especially in basketball-loving countries like Spain, France, and Australia. But once Clark was eliminated, international interest dropped sharply. European broadcasters that had just added WNBA coverage began questioning whether to keep it. Online engagement from global fans, which had been surging, suddenly went silent. The worldwide growth the league had dreamed about for years seemed to vanish overnight, all because one player wasn't on the floor. Before we move forward, make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already. We bring you the stories the mainstream outlets won't touch. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into WNBA stories, because we're only getting started. What followed after the finals turned out to be even more revealing than the games themselves. In the months since, several major WNBA voices have noticeably softened their stance on Caitlin Clark's importance. Players who had spent much of 2024 insisting that the league's success came from collective effort have begun acknowledging, carefully, that her impact might have been greater than they wanted to admit. A'ja Wilson, during a podcast appearance in early 2025, even remarked that the energy felt different without certain players in the postseason. She never said Clark's name outright, but fans knew what she meant. In response, the league has doubled down on its marketing for the upcoming year. Promotional materials are already spotlighting Caitlin Clark, even though the new season hasn't officially begun. The league is clearly putting all its hopes on Caitlin Clark staying healthy and leading the Fever on another deep playoff run. Everyone knows they can't afford a repeat of last season's finals fiasco. Several teams have even adjusted their schedules to feature more matchups with Indiana, fully aware that those are the games driving ticket sales and TV ratings. It's a smart business move, but also a quiet acknowledgement of how dependent the league has become on one player. Sophie Cunningham's arrival in Indiana for the 2025 season has only intensified the buzz. Her fierce, fearless attitude paired with Clark's creative playmaking has fans more excited than ever. Early ticket numbers are already breaking records, with some games selling out within minutes. The contrast with last year's finals couldn't be starker. Fans want to see the Fever. More specifically, they want to see Clark and now Cunningham. Everything else seems secondary, and the data keeps proving it. Financial forecasts for 2025 make the imbalance even clearer. Teams are effectively dividing their budgets into 2 categories: games against Indiana and all the others. The difference in revenue projections is massive. Some franchises expect their few matchups with the Fever to bring in more income than the rest of their home schedules combined. That's a serious problem for a league built on the idea of competitive balance. But when your championship series draws fewer fans than a random regular season Fever game, you can't ignore reality. Critics are quick to argue that putting so much of the league's weight on one player is short-sighted and risky. They're not wrong. If Clark were to get injured, play overseas, or step away early, the WNBA could easily slide back to where it was, or worse. Still, it's worth remembering the league wasn't exactly thriving before she arrived. Attendance was flat, ratings were low, and most casual fans couldn't even name 3 players. Clark flipped that narrative almost overnight. Relying on one superstar isn't ideal, but it's better than fading into obscurity again. This dynamic has also taken a mental toll on other players. Reports suggest several WNBA stars have spoken with sports psychologists about processing the reality that they're not the draw they once believed they were. It's not an insult. It's the truth. These are world-class athletes who have spent their lives perfecting their craft, but the spotlight has undeniably shifted. And now, many players are facing a tough realization that talent alone doesn't guarantee popularity. It's a truth male athletes learned a long time ago. Star power matters just as much as skill, and sometimes even more. The WNBA is now experiencing that lesson in real time, and it hasn't been easy to watch. Heading into the rest of 2025, the pressure on Caitlin Clark is enormous. She's not only carrying Indiana's championship hopes, but also, in many ways, the financial future of the entire league. It's an unfair expectation for someone still early in her career, but it's the reality everyone has come to accept. The encouraging part is that Clark seems to rise to these moments. Her recovery from the shoulder injury has gone smoothly, and reports from training camp suggest she looks sharper than ever. If she stays healthy and the Fever make a deep playoff run, maybe even capture the title, the league could finally find some stability. But the flip side is grim. What if the Fever stumble again? What if the finals once more play out in front of half-empty arenas and cheap tickets? The WNBA might not withstand another disappointment like last year's. Sponsors are already uneasy. Broadcast partners are reevaluating, and casual fans have shown they'll vanish the moment Clark isn't in the spotlight. The uncomfortable truth is that the league is one injury or one bad postseason away from a serious setback, and everyone inside it knows that, even if they don't say it out loud. Perhaps the most revealing part of all this is how it's reshaped the broader conversation about women's sports and marketing. For years, the argument was that women's leagues were undervalued, underfunded, and underpromoted, that if they were given equal exposure, they'd thrive just like the men's side. Caitlin Clark proved that argument both right and wrong. She demonstrated that, with the right star, the right story, and the right moment, women's basketball can captivate millions and generate real money. But she also exposed that success isn't automatic. It depends on timing, charisma, and connection with fans. You can't force it, and you can't sustain it without the right mix. The image of those empty seats at last year's finals will linger as a symbol of the league's biggest fear: fading relevance, overdependence, and the fragility of its momentum. Aya Wilson and Jonquil Jones were outstanding, but they became linked to that disappointment through no fault of their own. They worked tirelessly, they performed at the highest level, yet they happened to peak at a time when fans' attention was elsewhere. It's harsh, but that's the nature of sports. Sometimes, timing changes everything. And for them, the timing couldn't have been worse. So, what's the real lesson behind the $6 finals disaster? Maybe it's that the WNBA needs to face the truth about what actually drives attention instead of pretending every player has the same market power. Maybe it's that fans can't be forced to care simply because they're told they should. Or maybe it's that lasting success takes more than one superstar. Still, every rebuild has to start somewhere. Or perhaps the takeaway is even simpler: never take for granted the person who fills your seats. Because once they're gone, you might realize no one else can do what they did. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Can the WNBA stand strong without Caitlin Clark? Should the league be doing more to spotlight other players? And were those empty finals arenas a wake-up call, or the beginning of something worse? If you've made it this far, you're clearly a true fan of the game. So make sure you're subscribed, because we've got plenty more WNBA stories coming that you won't want to miss. The 2025 season is about to be wild, and we'll be here to cover every twist and turn.